I was on a cruise ship for Thanksgiving and went with my entire family. As an attempt to get away from my brothers, I stayed in my grandparents' cabin. On the first day of the cruise ship, I walked around meeting people, and some of the people I met were really into basketball, as I was. So we set up a scrimmage late night so we could all eat dinner and whatnot. The only problem was that the basketball courts closed at 7, so we would have to sneak in. My little group was playing every day and became my late night routine. Skip forward to the last night on board, where my group was playing a pickup game as we always did. I felt a buzz from my pocket, so I stopped playing for a second and read my text message. It was from an unknown number saying, "Go check on your grandparents." So not thinking twice, I said goodnight to my friends and went down to my floor. After the long walk and the elevator ride, I made it to my floor. I arrived on the complete opposite side of my room, so it was a long walk. As I was walking, I see this tattooed man staring at me on my left side. I am a paranoid person, so of course I admittedly thought something was going to happen. We walk past each other no problem, but he stops and says, "Excuse me, did you see the gentleman who came out of this room?" And I replied, "No." The mini conversation was over. We both went on our ways, so I thought. I took a glance behind, and now he was walking in my direction. I sort of slow down to see if he will pass, but when he gets close enough, I remark, "I'm such an idiot, my room is on the other side." The creepy man looks a little angry and says, "You're lying. Your room is at the front. Here, let me take you to your grandparents." My face turned white. However, I knew what would lie ahead if I went with him, so I took off running. I looked behind to see if he was chasing me, but he wasn't, so I stopped running and started walking. I was relieved until I heard loud footsteps, so I looked behind once again, and it was the man chasing after me, so I started to run again. The man caught up and grabbed me, but for some reason I was so scared I couldn't let out a scream. I was hoping someone would come out of their rooms to save me, but like I said, it was the middle of the night and nobody was around. He took me to this room where there was no furniture. I looked in, and there was this woman sitting on the ground in the shadows. I could tell she was overweight. The guy shoved me in and told the lady, "My shift is over. I'm going to sleep." The dark figure nodded. Again, I was still in complete shock. My legs felt like 300-pound weights. The woman grabbed me and said, "I'm getting married soon, so this is the last amount of fun I'm going to have. Don't forget I was a minor at the time." My vision was fading in and out. I thought I was going to collapse, but suddenly the buffet was coming up in my stomach and I threw up on her. After that, I left the room and sprinted all the way to my grandparents' room. I got in there, double-bolted the locks. My grandparents woke up and said, "Was everything okay?" And I was thinking, let me spill my guts over what just happened. However, I said the security guard found my friends playing basketball, so we all ran from him. They said okay and went back to sleep. Meanwhile, I just stayed in the bathroom all night, not because of the buffet, but I was really scared. The guy must have been stalking me and seen me go to my room with my grandparents over the few on board. So I was really freaked out, thinking he knew my room. I stayed up all night, but there were no problems. My family created a plan to go to brunch in the dining hall, so we all got up at 8 and went there. The waiter was taking us to our seats. I was scanning the area when I noticed the same man who chased me yesterday with an overweight woman and a couple of other goons. They saw me too, so they all started staring at me. My whole family went to be seated, but I was in the middle of a staring contest. Luckily, my mom saw me and saw what was going on. My mom looked at me, then looked at the table and said, "The guy with all those tattoos proposed to the girl a few nights back." I said out loud, "What the actual fuck?" My mom hit me again and said, "Watch your mouth and go sit down." I ended up sitting down, so my back was to the table of the creeps. I never said a word about what happened that night, and I don't plan on telling my family because I'm worried they won't want to take cruises in the future. However, I was texting my new friends from the basketball courts and told them what happened that night. One of them said, "I was chased by the same man. However, I was able to outrun him before he caught me. I was a bit relieved I got that off of my chest and I wasn't alone in my situation. I still didn't decide to tell anyone else. I really don't understand how those people got my phone number. But tattoo head and overweight woman. I was on the run. I don't want to say why because I don't want to incriminate myself. Though if anyone from the authorities does read this, I could most likely enter a plea of mental disorder. No sane person would surely claim to have experienced what I did. I had been sleeping rough down by the docks, which was not as bad as it sounds. I had found a sheltered place, a covered lock-up bay for bicycles that no one seemed to use. I had a good sleeping bag and a sad face that worked wonders for getting change from passing strangers. All good until I noticed I was being eyeballed by the occupants of a passing patrol car. Easy come, easy go, I thought, putting my hands in my pockets and walking away as nonchalantly as I could from my spot. I did not want to take any chances, so it was time to move on. One of the few things I can say with any certainty about my deadbeat life is that I have usually gone with the flow. The other kids were stealing cars, so I did the same. There was easy money moving drugs around on behalf of the local dealer, so that became my thing. When matters escalated, when the thing I don't want to talk about happened, I was part of a crew. Bad people that I fell in with, going with the flow. I rounded a corner and a cruise ship came into view. It looked like it had seen better days, I thought, then noticed there was a walkway from the side of the docks attached to the ship, and no one in sight. The flow took me up the walkway and onto the ship. Everywhere I looked I saw cracked paint and stains and cobweb after cobweb. Faded bunting hung limply from railings and water pooled in gaps in the decking. I could not see anyone paying to take a cruise on this ship. For my part, I've never felt guilty about taking a free ride in my life, and the only destination I cared about was away from here. I had still seen no crew but did not want to push my luck, so I hunted around for the nearest place to hide. A loose cover over a lifeboat later and I was snuggled up in the dark. And just in time as I could hear shouting, boots clattering. The flurry of noise passed. I chanced to look out from the lifeboat and saw a dozen or so wooden crates being manhandled up the walkway. I was starting to think this was a cargo vessel rather than a cruise liner. Maybe once, 20 or more years ago, it had welcomed on-board passengers for voyages of pampered luxury. Surely not now, though. Then I heard new voices, men talking animatedly and sounding like they were heading my way. I ducked back under cover and waited. Soon after I felt the ship rattle beneath me, felt as much as heard it creaking and groaning, and then with a worrying lurch it started moving. I started to relax. I had left one lot of troubles behind and the future was unwritten. It was not long though before my bladder ruined my sense of calm. I was bursting but did not want to go in the lifeboat as I had no idea how long I would need to hide out there. So, real cautious, real slow, I emerged onto the deck. I seemed to be alone. Relieved, I relieved myself. The deck on this part of the ship was empty apart from my lifeboat and a row of sun loungers. It had turned into a hot day and I would have loved to have settled into one but dared not risk it. My business finished, I climbed back under the covers and got as comfortable as I could. At some point I fell asleep. After stretching my aching limbs in the confined space of my new home and yawning, I lifted the cover a little to see if the coast was clear so I could head out and try and find something to eat and drink. It was fine and I was soon back on deck. Still alone, the only passenger, it seemed to me. A bit further down the deck, the doors to what I assumed were cabins remained closed, and it looked like the shutters on the small windows of each were down. My theory that this was now a cargo ship rather than a passenger vessel appeared more and more likely. This was reinforced when, an hour or so later, we approached a new harbor. I had no idea where we were, but the dock we pulled into was even more run down than the ship. Crouching low and glancing constantly around, I watched as more boxes were loaded. These boxes seemed to rattle and were dotted with what I thought could be air holes. Livestock containers, I assumed. Some poor beasts being transported under conditions which must have been illegal. I decided to go in search of food and something to wash it down with while I hoped the crew were fully occupied loading their new cargo. I got lucky, finding an unlocked storeroom with tins of corned meat and, wonders of wonders, a crate of beer. I took less than I wanted as I did not want to make it too obvious there was a thief on board and scurried back to the lifeboat. Filling my belly with salty, rubbery meat washed down with warm beer, it started to feel like a home from home, until the cries began. At first I thought it was just the ship creaking, its old metal and wood protesting, but soon it became horribly clear they were the cries of living creatures. The livestock it must have been. They almost sounded human. It was horrible. I wiped my face, feeling suddenly hot. Whether it was the hideous sounds or the warm beer and cold meat, my stomach lurched. I hurried back out onto the deck and leant over the side of the ship where I was violently sick. I stood there gasping and shivering. Night was falling and I watched the last of the light slip away, thankful that the only sounds I could hear now were the of the ship and the water lapping at its hull, and then a click. I turned, saw it was one of the cabin doors opening. I swore to myself. There was no time to get back into the lifeboat, so I ducked under its prow and made myself as small as possible. A man emerged from the cabin. He wore a long black coat and moved with a slow, easy grace. He walked with a silver-handled cane, though for show rather than any need of it, I believed. Under the light of the stars and a quarter moon, his skin appeared pale. His head was shaven, with the intermingling lines of a tattoo reaching up one side of his face. The sight of him made me shiver and I tried to retreat further back under the lifeboat. As he began to promenade along the deck, more cabin doors opened and more figures stepped out. There were about a dozen that I could see. Each was draped in black. Their pale countenances were expressionless. Some appeared to be male, some female. All their heads were shaved. A variety of intricate facial tattoos seemed to be the only distinguishing marks. Not a word was said between them as they took in the night air. I watched entranced and unsettled in equal measure. There was something otherworldly about the passengers, something which set my nerves on edge. I would have fled if I could, but as it was I had no choice but to cower in my hiding place and hope that none of them would spot me, even though their stroll along the decks was now taking them right past me. A new figure appeared. He was dressed in a white uniform and carried a tray holding narrow, ornate glasses filled to the brim with a dark liquid. A companion followed in his wake. Together they began to move among the passengers, offering drinks which were eagerly taken. For all their strange appearance, the passengers had up to that point shown a degree of finesse that seemed to be cast aside as they greedily swallowed down their drinks in one, then proceeded to lick the glasses with long, slim tongues that flickered out of lips stained dark red with the liquid. The passenger closest to me smiled, a tight, controlled movement. I felt sick when I saw his teeth saw sharp, bestial tips. I closed my eyes, like a child hiding from something that should have remained within its imagination. I could not see anymore without losing control. Hours later, a morning that I thought would never come crept into the sky, and the deck was once more deserted. The passengers had returned to their cabins. I stayed in my hiding place and before long saw the crew carrying objects bundled inside tarpaulin onto deck. One by one they tossed their loads into the sea. It was the carcasses of the livestock, I thought, then glimpsed a hand in a gap in the tarpaulin shroud as it struck the gray ocean. A human hand. 10 loads in all were discarded. 10 bodies. They floated on the surface for a moment before slipping into the depths. There was no blood pooling on the surface. No sign of life. I thought of a creature that had also traveled by ship from its ancient home to English shores. of legends and myths. I thought of the cries I had heard, and cold fear passed through my body as the truth dawned on me. I thought of sly smiles and crimson-stained lips and razor-sharp teeth, of the hell which awaited me on this ship when night once more fell. I crouched there and wept. The sun was high overhead when my chance presented itself. We were once more approaching a dock. I saw crates lined up, waiting to be brought on board. Imagined glasses brimming, ready for the passengers to drink their fill. I took my chance and clambered up onto the side of the ship, then plummeted into the water. I made it. I am sitting on a beach now, sipping a cold drink. It is a beautiful day, but I know now that there are creatures out there that care nothing for the day, that wait for the sun to dip below the horizon. I know now that when night falls, fear returns. My wife Kimmy and I departed on our cruise 2 days ago. We've been looking forward to this cruise for the last 5 months, and as the days dwindled down, we could hardly contain our excitement. Over the last 4 days, we flew to Australia and boarded our cruise ship, excited for our 16-day vacation, one we each sorely needed. Our ship took off with no problems. We got situated in our room, went swimming, ate at one of the many restaurants here, and swam in an amazing infinite pool. We ended the night with a glass of champagne on the upper balcony of the cruise ship. It was truly amazing. We went to bed, and Kimmy fell fast asleep, much to my dismay. I browsed the internet on my phone for a little while before passing out myself. At about 2 a.m., I woke up and noticed my wife wasn't next to me. I assumed she was using the bathroom, so I turned over. My eyes were still closed once I faced the other way, and I would have never noticed she was there if I wouldn't have felt her breath on my face. I opened my eyes, and she was kneeling down on my side of the bed, breathing heavily, with her eyes as wide as she could get them. Her hair was stringy and her face was damp from sweat, even through our air-conditioned room. It was absolutely horrifying. I jumped backwards across the bed and almost fell off the other side. "Kimmy?" I asked. She just stayed in her kneeling position and panted, with her eyes fixed on me. I said her name once more, and she began breathing slower. I sat there in horror as she stood up, walked around to the side of the bed that I was now on, and began to crawl in as I slid back over to my side. She let out a weak, "Get back to your side," and laid down. Then, she fell asleep like nothing had happened. I laid there for the rest of the night with more anxiety than I've ever felt before. My heart was practically beating out of my chest, and I had cold sweats for hours. I felt immense relief when the sun came up. When she woke up, I asked Kimmy about what had happened during the night. She didn't remember anything. She said she remembers getting up to go to the bathroom, then moving me over because I had rolled to her side of the bed when she went. I told her it really freaked me out, but she insisted I had just had a weird, bad dream. I knew the truth. Kimmy was complaining of a headache, so we decided to order breakfast in instead of going to the buffet. Kimmy got a huge meal. It's unbelievable how much that girl can eat without gaining an ounce. She's 5 feet 2 inches and tiny. She got 4 pancakes, 2 scrambled eggs, 3 strips of bacon, 3 sausage links, and an order of hash browns. I got what they call a sausage scrambler. The food took a little while to get there, all the while Kimmy mentioning how she didn't feel good and hoped that eating would help her ailments. Our food was delivered to our room, and we sat down to eat. Kimmy took the lid off of her tray and slid back in her chair with a look of disgust on her face. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "You're kidding, right? You don't smell that." I told her I didn't smell anything besides our food. She looked at her tray with a grimace and broke off a small piece of bacon. She brought it to her mouth and bit into it and immediately spit it back out, gagging. "What?" I asked. "It fucking tastes like old, stale, raw meat, Nick." "What do you mean, what?" The food looked fine. The food smelled fine. There was literally nothing wrong with it. She refused to eat it and made me take it out of our room. After I threw her food away, I went down to the buffet and got her a bowl of fruit, which she happily accepted and ate without objection. After eating, Kimmy decided to take a shower in preparation for the day ahead of us. While she did that, I laid on the bed and watched TV. I dozed off for a while, considering I hadn't slept much the night before, and woke up a little over an hour later. I had to triple check my phone for the time because I could still hear the shower running in the bathroom. I knocked on the door and got no response. I was scared at this point. I had no idea what I was going to find on the other side of that door. Had she slipped and hit her head? I didn't know what to expect. I announced that I was going to enter and proceeded through the door. I didn't see her anywhere in the bathroom, so I decided she must still be in the shower itself. The curtain was closed. I inched my way towards it, with my lifelong love of horror movies telling me something was going to jump out at me any second. Nothing ever jumped. I slowly slid the curtain open to find Kimmy standing there, facing me, with her eyes as wide as they were the night before. "Kimmy, what are you doing?" I asked, halfway in a panic as I slowly backed away. It was then I noticed that the entire lower right half of her body, the part that was getting splashed with water, was red. There was no fog in the bathroom though, and no steam was coming from the shower. She had the water on as cold as it could go. "Kimmy!" I shouted. She snapped out of it instantly and yelped. "When did you get in here? You scared the shit out of me," she said as she turned the water off. "I scared the shit out of you. What the fuck was that? What was what? You don't know what just happened. What are you talking about?" She insisted as she stepped out of the tub and wrapped herself in a towel. I explained what had just happened. She acted completely dumbfounded and told me that I was going crazy. She finished getting ready and we went about our day. Everything was fine until we went to one of the infinite pools. We were tucked away in our little section of the somewhat crowded pool, just talking and relaxing in the perfect water under the hot sun. I don't remember what we were talking about, but suddenly, Kimmy stopped talking mid-sentence and became fixated on something just over my shoulder. I looked behind me and saw nothing out of the ordinary. I asked her what she was looking at, but she just kept her eyes locked on whatever she saw. I took another slow, nervous look behind me, and when I turned back, she was gone. It was only a second before I noticed she was underwater. I kind of awkwardly just stood there for a couple seconds, not sure if she was playing a joke on me or what. Then, I myself went under the water and opened my eyes. When I did, she was directly in front of my face, with her eyes, now bloodshot from the chlorine, wide open as they had been the last 2 times something weird had happened. On instinct, I moved backwards, but she stayed with me, only inches from my face. I returned to the surface and caught my breath. She didn't. I grabbed her by her shoulders and brought her up to the surface, but her body was limp, and she immediately fell back under. I grabbed her again and held her above water, saying her name over and over. People started to look towards us with concern. Then, as if nothing had happened, she came back to. She looked me in the eyes with a normal look and kissed me. She asked why I looked so worried, but I didn't even bother trying to explain. The rest of the day went on without incident. A couple games of shuffleboard, a stop at the jacuzzi, and dinner, and things were okay. We got back to the room, had some private time, and decided to call it a night. Around the same time as the previous night, 2 a.m., I woke up once again. This time, I was facing Kimmy as I slept, and when I opened my eyes, I found her to be laying on the bed, facing me, with her eyes wide open, with a slight smirk on her face. I whispered her name. She was breathing heavily, again like panting. I whispered her name a little louder as I sat up on the bed. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine as I moved. I placed my hand on her head, and found her to be freezing cold. I said her name once more, this time at normal volume, and she let out a piercing shriek that, while short, surely woke the entire floor. It made me jump backwards and fall off my edge of the bed. With my back to the wall, I watched as my wife turned over onto her hands and knees, and now, with her wide eyes and a smile on her face, crawl around the surface of the bed, on no discernible path, with her huge brown eyes fixed on mine the whole time. Then, she stood up and let her head hang to the side. She stood like that, staring through me until almost 3:30 a.m., before she calmly crawled down and went back to sleep. Some things happened today that I will detail tomorrow, but I just wanted to get this piece up so I can hopefully get some advice. I really need help, and I didn't know where else to turn. Whatever is happening to my wife isn't showing any signs of slowing down or stopping anytime soon, and we're on this ship whether we like it or not for the next 14 days. I need help. Please,